My name is Derek Thompson. I'm 27 years old, and I live alone in a cramped apartment on the outskirts of Seattle, Washington. It's not much to look at. A third-floor walk-up in a building that's seen better decades. The tiles in the bathroom are chipped and discolored. The hinges on every door squeak no matter how much WD-40 I spray on them. And there's a window in the living room that never quite closes all the way, letting in a persistent draft that makes the curtains flutter even on still nights. But it's mine, or at least I pay rent on it. And in a city like Seattle where the cost of living climbs higher every year, that counts for something. I work night shifts as a rideshare driver for one of those app-based companies everyone uses but nobody really thinks about. You know the type: ping, you get a request, you drive across town, pick up a stranger, make small talk or sit in awkward silence depending on their mood, drop them off, repeat. It's not glamorous work. Some nights I'm ferrying drunk college kids from Capitol Hill back to their dorms. Other nights it's exhausted nurses finishing their shifts at Harborview, or business types catching early morning flights out of SeaTac. The job pays just enough to cover rent, groceries, gas, and the occasional beer. No family nearby to lean on. My parents retired to Arizona years ago, and we talk maybe once a month if that. No close friends either, except for Jason, my old college buddy from the University of Washington, and even he's always busy these days with his consulting job that has him traveling more than he's home. Most nights, I come back to my apartment around 2 or 3 in the morning, peel off my jacket that smells like a mix of air freshener and other people's cologne, crack open whatever's in the fridge, and collapse on my sagging couch until it's time to do it all over again. It's a lonely existence, but it's stable, predictable. Nobody bothers me, and I don't bother anyone. That's how I like it, or at least that's what I tell myself when the silence gets too heavy. That particular Wednesday night in late October had been brutal. I'd been driving for 12 hours straight, one ride after another without a break, chasing surge pricing across the city. My back ached from sitting. My eyes burned from staring at headlights and street signs in the fog, and my mind felt like it was wrapped in cotton. The weather had turned nasty around midnight. Thick fog rolling in from Puget Sound, blanketing everything in a cold, damp embrace that made visibility terrible and driving treacherous. By the time I finished my last ride, dropping off a quiet couple in Ballard, it was 1:30 a.m., and all I wanted was to get home, maybe take a hot shower, and pass out. I navigated through the empty streets, the fog so thick my headlights barely cut through it. The city felt deserted, almost post-apocalyptic, with the streetlights creating these eerie halos of orange light that faded into gray nothing. When I finally turned onto my street, a quiet residential block lined with old apartment buildings and a few scraggly trees, I was already mentally checked out, my body moving on autopilot. That's when I noticed the car. It was parked directly outside my building, a silver Honda Accord with the engine off and the lights dark. At first, I almost drove past it, figuring it was just another resident's car. But something made me look twice. Maybe it was the way it was positioned, slightly crooked as if it had been parked in a hurry. Or maybe it was some subconscious recognition. Either way, I slowed down, pulled into my usual spot a few spaces ahead, and killed my engine. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the Honda in my rearview mirror. The fog swirled around it, and I could just barely make out the silhouette of someone sitting in the driver's seat, completely still. My first thought was that it might be someone waiting to pick up a rideshare, though that didn't make much sense at this hour in this neighborhood. My second thought was more paranoid. Maybe it was someone casing the building, looking for cars to break into or apartments to rob. Seattle had its share of property crime, and this wouldn't be the first time I'd seen something sketchy on my street. But then, as I squinted through the fog and dim light, recognition hit me like a cold wave. I knew that car. I'd been in it before, years ago when Jason and I were still in college, and his mom would occasionally pick us up from campus when we'd had too much to drink at some party or another. Linda Morrison, Jason's mom. My heart rate picked up, confusion mixing with concern. What the hell was she doing parked outside my apartment at 1:30 in the morning? Jason was out of town. I knew that because he'd texted me last week saying he'd be in Austin for some big consulting project and wouldn't be back until next month. So why was his mom here, in the fog, sitting alone in her car with the engine off? I grabbed my phone, Checked to see if I'd missed any messages or calls from Jason. Nothing. Just the usual junk notifications and a promotional email from some restaurant I'd ordered from once 6 months ago. I pocketed my phone, took a deep breath, and got out of my car. The cold hit me immediately, that damp Seattle cold that seeps into your bones. I zipped my jacket up and walked slowly toward the Honda, my footsteps echoing softly on the wet pavement. As I got closer, I could see more details through the fogged-up windows. There was definitely someone in the driver's seat, hunched forward slightly, and even through the condensation I could tell something was wrong. I approached the driver's side window and hesitated for just a second before reaching out and tapping gently on the glass with my knuckle. 3 soft raps. The figure inside jumped violently, a sharp intake of breath audible even through the closed window. Then, slowly, the window rolled down about halfway, and I found myself looking at Linda Morrison. Except she looked nothing like the woman I remembered. Linda had always been put together, the kind of person who radiated quiet competence and warmth. She was in her early 50s, worked some high-level corporate job that Jason rarely talked about in detail, and whenever I'd seen her at Jason's place or at family gatherings I'd been invited to, she'd been impeccably dressed, always smiling, always asking thoughtful questions about how school was going or how life was treating me. She had this way of making you feel like you mattered, like she genuinely cared about your answer. The woman staring at me now was a ghost of that person. Her face was streaked with tears, black mascara running in thin rivers down her cheeks. Her eyes were red and swollen, like she'd been crying for hours. Her hair, usually styled perfectly, was disheveled and hanging loose around her face. She wore a cardigan pulled tight around her shoulders, and even in the dim light, I could see she was shaking. Whether from cold or emotion, I couldn't tell. She looked utterly broken, like someone who'd been carrying the weight of the world and had finally collapsed under it. "Derek?" she whispered, her voice hoarse and trembling. She blinked at me as if she couldn't quite believe I was real.
I'm sorry.
"I'm so sorry. I didn't know where else to go." My mind raced, trying to process what I was seeing. "Mrs. Morrison? What's going on? Are you okay? Where's Jason?" She shook her head quickly, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "He's traveling, Austin, for work. Couldn't call him with this. I can't drag him into this mess. Her voice broke, and she pressed a hand to her mouth, trying to hold back a sob. I glanced around the empty street, the fog pressing in on all sides, and then back at her. Every instinct told me something was seriously wrong. This wasn't just a bad day or a rough patch. This was someone in crisis. "Mrs. Morrison, you can't just sit out here in the cold like this," I said, trying to keep my voice steady and calm even though my heart was pounding. "Come inside. We can talk. Whatever's going on. Sitting in your car at 2 in the morning isn't going to help." She looked up at me, and for a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Hope, maybe, or desperation, or both. She hesitated, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. "I don't want to impose," she whispered. I saw you drop Jason off here once, months ago. I remembered the building. I've been driving around for hours, and I just ended up here. I don't know why."
I'm sorry.
"You're not imposing," I said firmly. "Come on, let's get you inside where it's warm." After what felt like an eternity, she nodded slowly. She killed the engine, grabbed a small purse from the passenger seat, and opened the door. As she stepped out, I could see she was unsteady on her feet, whether from exhaustion or stress. I reached out instinctively to steady her, and she didn't pull away. Together, we walked toward the entrance of my building, the fog swallowing the street behind us. I unlocked the outer door, held it open for her, and we climbed the 3 flights of stairs in silence. My apartment suddenly felt too small, too messy, too inadequate for whatever crisis had brought Jason's mom to my doorstep in the middle of the night. But as I unlocked my apartment door and gestured for her to come inside, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever was happening, I couldn't just turn her away. She stepped inside, and I closed the door behind us, shutting out the cold and the fog and the empty street. Inside, I made her tea while she sat on my worn couch, clutching a tissue. Her hands shook as she took the mug. "I'm sorry for showing up like this," Linda said quietly, staring down at the tea in her hands as if it might hold answers she desperately needed. "I know this is bizarre. I know you must think I've lost my mind." I sat down in the chair across from her, trying to project a calmness I didn't feel. "It's okay, Mrs. Morrison. Really. Just tell me what happened. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out." She took a shaky breath, and for a moment, I thought she might break down again. But instead, she seemed to gather herself, drawing on some inner reserve of strength I could only imagine. When she finally looked up at me, her eyes were still red but clearer, more focused. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen to the whole thing before you decide I'm crazy or paranoid," she began. "Can you do that?" "Of course," I said immediately. She nodded, took a sip of the tea, and set the mug down on the coffee table with trembling hands. "I've worked for the past 15 years as the chief financial officer at Cascade Energy. Do you know them?" I nodded. Everyone in Seattle knew Cascade Energy. They were one of those companies that had grown explosively over the past decade, riding the wave of renewable energy investment. They built wind farms and solar installations, marketed themselves as the future of clean power, and their CEO, a man named Vincent Drummond, was practically a local celebrity. Billionaire philanthropist, always in the news for donating to environmental causes or speaking at conferences about climate change. The kind of guy who got fawning profiles in business magazines. "I know of them," I said. "Big renewable energy company, right? Vincent Drummond's company." "That's right," Linda said, and something dark flickered across her face when I mentioned Drummond's name. Vincent Drummond. Everyone thinks he's this visionary, this genius who's going to save the planet while making billions. The media loves him. Politicians love him. He's untouchable. She paused, her jaw tightening. "But it's all a lie, Derek. All of it." I leaned forward, my full attention on her now. "What do you mean?" 3 months ago, I was doing routine financial reviews, quarterly audits, reconciling accounts, the kind of thing I've done 1,000 times. But I noticed something odd. Small discrepancies in our vendor payments. Amounts that didn't quite match up with the contracts on file. At first, I thought it was just clerical errors, maybe some invoices that hadn't been properly documented. But the more I dug, the more I found. Her hands clenched into fists on her lap. "Vincent has been laundering money, Derek. Billions of dollars. He's set up shell companies, fake vendors that don't actually exist or that are controlled by people connected to him. Cascade Energy pays these vendors for services that were never rendered, equipment that was never delivered, consulting that never happened. The money gets funneled through these shell companies, then moved offshore to accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Panama. Places where it's nearly impossible to trace." I felt my stomach drop. "Jesus, that's massive fraud." "It's more than fraud," Linda said, her voice rising slightly with barely contained anger. "It's organized crime. He's not just stealing from the company, he's stealing from investors, from pension funds, from the government grants we receive for renewable energy projects. Taxpayer money, Derek. Money that's supposed to be going toward building clean energy infrastructure is ending up in Vincent's personal accounts. And it's not just him. He has a whole network. His CFO before me knew, his head of operations knows, his personal attorney is facilitating it. It's systemic." I sat back, trying to process what she was telling me. "So what did you do? Did you report it?" Linda laughed bitterly. "I tried to do the right thing. I thought maybe stupidly, naively, that it might be some kind of misunderstanding. That maybe Vincent didn't know. That someone else was manipulating the books and he'd be horrified when I told him. So I went to him privately. I scheduled a meeting in his office, brought my documentation, and I laid it all out for him." She paused, her eyes distant, reliving the memory. "He listened to everything I had to say. He looked at the evidence. And then Derek, he smiled. Actually smiled. And he said, 'Linda, I'm disappointed in you. I thought you were smarter than this.' What did he mean? He meant that I should have kept my mouth shut, that I should have played along, maybe even taken a cut for myself. He offered me money right there, $500,000 wired to any account I wanted, tax-free, if I would just forget what I'd seen and continue processing the payments without questions. When I refused, when I told him I was going to report it to the board of directors and to federal authorities, his whole demeanor changed. He stopped smiling. He leaned across his desk, and he told me that if I pursued this, I would regret it for the rest of my very short career. Linda's voice had dropped to almost a whisper now, and I could see her fighting to keep her composure. I thought he was just trying to scare me. I thought that once I got out of his office and contacted the right people, it would be fine. But Derek, within 48 hours, my entire life fell apart. What happened? I was fired first. Immediate termination. But not just fired, accused. Vincent had his IT team plant evidence in my email account, backdated messages that made it look like I had been the one approving the fraudulent payments. They altered digital logs to show that I had accessed restricted financial systems, that I had been communicating with the shell company representatives. They built an entire false narrative that painted me as the mastermind behind the embezzlement scheme. My hands had gone cold. That's insane. Couldn't you prove it wasn't you? How? Linda asked, her voice breaking. The digital evidence is compelling. Emails with my name on them, my login credentials, my digital signature. Vincent has an entire team of experts who specialize in this kind of thing, covering tracks, creating false trails. And he moved fast. Before I could even hire a lawyer or gather my own evidence, he had frozen my assets. He can do that? He claimed I owed the company restitution for the stolen funds. He got a friendly judge to issue an emergency order freezing my bank accounts, my investment accounts, even put a lien on my house. I can't access my own money, Derek. Everything I've worked for, saved for, it's all locked away. I couldn't even pay a retainer for a good attorney. The only lawyer I could afford was a public defender type who took one look at the case and basically told me I was screwed. I felt a surge of anger on her behalf. This is unbelievable. Surely someone can see through this? What about Jason? Does he know? Linda shook her head quickly. I haven't told him. I can't. He's building his career, he's finally stable after years of struggling. If I drag him into this mess, if Vincent's people start looking at him too, I can't do that to my son. Besides, what could he do? Vincent Drummond is a billionaire with unlimited resources. Jason's just a consultant trying to make rent. She pulled her cardigan tighter around herself, and that's when I noticed them. The bruises on her wrists. They were partially hidden by the fabric, but as she moved, I caught glimpses of dark purple marks, the unmistakable pattern of fingerprints where someone had grabbed her hard. Mrs. Morrison, I said carefully, nodding toward her wrists. Those bruises. What happened? She followed my gaze and quickly adjusted her sleeves to cover them. But it was too late. She'd been seen. For a moment, she looked like she might deny it or brush it off. But then her shoulders sagged in defeat. His security team, she said quietly. Vincent has private security, ex-military types, the kind of people who know how to hurt you without leaving too much evidence. They cornered me 2 days ago outside my lawyer's office. There were 2 of them, big guys in suits. They pulled me into an alley, and they asked me if I had made copies of the evidence. If I had proof stored somewhere that could still hurt Vincent. And did you? I asked. Linda looked at me for a long moment, as if weighing whether she could trust me. Then slowly she nodded. Yes, before everything went to hell, I made copies. I downloaded everything onto a flash drive, transaction records, emails, offshore account numbers, communications with shell company representatives. Everything. I knew I might need insurance. Where is it? Hidden. I have a storage unit across town, one of those places where you can rent a small locker. It's under a different name, paid for in cash. The flash drive is there, locked away. It's the only leverage I have. Did you tell them that? No, she said firmly. I told them I didn't have anything, that Vincent had destroyed all the evidence when he fired me. But they didn't believe me. One of them grabbed my wrists. She gestured to the bruises. And twisted until I thought my bones were going to break. He told me that if I was lying, if any evidence surfaced, they'd find me again and it would be much worse. The room felt suddenly colder.
Jesus Christ.
Mrs. Morrison, this is beyond corporate fraud. This is witness intimidation. Assault. You need to go to the police. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. The police? Derek Vincent Drummond donates millions to the mayor's re-election campaign. He sits on charitable boards with half the city council. The police chief plays golf with him every month. If I walk into a police station and try to report this, I guarantee you that within an hour, Vincent will know about it. And his people will come for me before I make it home. What about federal authorities? The FBI? I've thought about that, Linda admitted. Financial crimes, money laundering, that's FBI territory. But I need to be smart about how I approach them. I can't just walk in off the street with a wild story. I need evidence, and I need to make sure I'm protected before I hand it over. Because the moment that flash drive changes hands, I become either a witness who needs protecting or a loose end that Vincent needs to eliminate. I ran my hands through my hair, feeling overwhelmed. This was so far beyond anything I'd ever dealt with. I was a rideshare driver living paycheck to paycheck in a crappy apartment. What was I supposed to do against a billionaire with unlimited resources and no moral compass? But looking at Linda, broken, terrified, with nowhere else to turn, I knew I couldn't just do nothing. Okay, I said finally. Okay, here's what we're going to do. First, you're staying here tonight. It's not safe for you to be alone in your car or trying to find a hotel where someone might recognize you. Second, tomorrow we figure out how to get that flash drive safely and how to contact the right people at the FBI. I have a cousin, Rachel, who works for the federal government. She's with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division in the Seattle field office. I can reach out to her, see if she can help. Linda's eyes widened. You have a contact at the FBI? Sort of. I mean, we're not super close, but she's family. We see each other at Thanksgiving and stuff. She'd take a meeting, at least listen to what you have to say. For the first time since I'd found her in the car, something like hope flickered across Linda's face. Derek, if you could do that, if there's any chance. We'll try, I said. But Mrs. Morrison, I need you to be completely honest with me. Is there anything else? Anything you haven't told me that could come back and bite us? She shook her head. No. I've told you everything. I swear. I wanted to believe her. Looking into her exhausted, desperate eyes, I chose to believe her. All right then, I said. Let's get through tonight first. You can take my bed, I'll sleep on the couch. Tomorrow we start fighting back. Linda stood up, and before I could react, she crossed the space between us and wrapped her arms around me in a tight hug. She was shaking, her face pressed against my shoulder, and I could feel hot tears soaking through my shirt. Thank you, she whispered. You don't know what this means. Jason was right about you. He always said you were the most loyal friend anyone could have. I awkwardly patted her back, unsure how to respond. It's going to be okay, Mrs. Morrison. We'll figure this out. As I helped her get settled in my bedroom, finding her a spare toothbrush and some clean towels, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just stepped off a cliff into something far deeper and more dangerous than I understood. But there was no turning back now. The next morning came too quickly. I'd barely slept on the couch, my mind racing with everything Linda had told me, jumping at every sound from the street below. When gray Seattle dawn finally filtered through my inadequate curtains, I found myself staring at the ceiling, wondering what the hell I'd gotten myself into. Linda emerged from the bedroom around 7, looking marginally better than she had the night before. She'd washed her face, pulled her hair back into a ponytail, and there was a determination in her eyes that hadn't been there in the foggy darkness. She was wearing the same clothes from yesterday, but she carried herself differently. Less like a victim, more like someone preparing for battle. I didn't sleep much, she admitted, accepting the coffee I'd brewed. But I feel clearer. Thank you for letting me stay, Derek. I know this is asking a lot. Don't worry about it, I said, pulling out my phone. Let me text my cousin Rachel. See if she can meet with us today. I composed a careful message, trying to strike the right balance between urgent and not completely insane. Hey Rachel, I know this is random, but I have a friend who's dealing with a serious financial fraud situation. Corporate embezzlement, money laundering, the works. She has evidence but needs to talk to someone she can trust at the FBI. Any chance you could meet with us today? It's legitimately important. Rachel's response came 15 minutes later. That's quite the Wednesday morning text, Derek. I'm intrigued and slightly concerned. I can meet at 2